You are now watching On Point, a news and public affairs show from California State University Northridge.
Welcome to CSUN On Point. I'm your host, Brittany Ornelas, and today we are focusing on natural disasters that have reshaped communities, destroyed homes, and tested the resilience of thousands, the California wildfires. From the Palisades fire that reduced parts of the Pacific Palisades to ashes, to the Eden Fire that blackened the foothills of the San Gabriel Valley. These fires have undoubtedly left a mark on the land and the people who called those cities home. We will hear from Grant Hall, a firefighter from Riverside, and a two-time wildfire evacuee and CSUN student, Wenjie Porter. Thank you so much for being here, Grant.
Thank you for having me.
Wenjie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Grant, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit of your background and what kind of ignited you to become a firefighter?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of got into fire when I was young, 19 years old. I was going to college, and then I kind of decided that was just something that I just didn't really want to pursue anymore. After that, I came home and I talked with my dad. We have an old family friend who is a retired captain with Ventura County Fire. And he kind of showed me that fire was kind of something that I would be interested in doing. And he gave me the steps on what to take, like go get my EMT, go get a fire academy. And after that, I got hired shortly after and have been doing that since then. It's been about 9 years now.
Great. Wenjie, when you sit next to a firefighter like Grant that has been doing this for a very long time, being a two-time evacuee, how does that make you feel about their field?
I think it's a very important field, and I'm very grateful that he's here and puts his life out every day to do his job and protect others. It's a big thing.
Grant, tell us a little bit more about the training that goes into firefighting.
Oh, there's a lot of training. There's different aspects to fire. There's the wildland side, which is specifically what the Palisades and the Eden Fire were. And then there's the city side, which is what I'm in. Mm-hmm. And there's two different types of training. So when it comes to wildland, there's a lot of hiking that goes in, a lot of cardio and stuff like that. City, it's more based on just kind of working on like emergency dispatch, because we're all risk. So we respond to not only medicals, traffic accidents, and then as well as like wild and structure fire. So there's a various amount of training that can go into that.
For someone that doesn't know, can you kind of just break it down? So you mentioned wildfires, mm-hmm. and then, the city. You said that there's hiking, and then, go ahead, sorry.
So yeah, with wildfires, like I said, there's a lot of hiking that goes in because so when the fire is on a mountainside or anything like that, one way of their putting a fire out is they have to hike up the hose and put in one stick at a time, hiking up the hose. So there's a hiking that goes into that. So they have to make sure that they're definitely physically capable.
Have you done that type of
Yes,
training?
I have. But that was when I first started fire. And then, like I said, now for the last 4 years, I've been in the city. Yeah.
So would you say that the firefighters that were out putting the Palisades fire and the Eden fire, they were part of the wildlife?
They were both, because at this time of the year, we've laid off a lot of people for the seasonal firefighter position. So it was a mixture of wildland firefighters and city firefighters. There was people coming out from different states to help out as well, just because it was such an impactful fire.
Thank you. Wenjie, tell us a little bit about the evacuation and how that went for you. Did they give you a sufficient amount of time to evacuate?
Yeah, so I live near Calabasas, so we were dealing with the Pacific Palisades fire. And I remember, unfortunately for our area, we lost power and service. So getting those SOS messages were really important and kind of made sure we were on our toes and ready to leave. And luckily we had a plan, which is always great. And once it was time, we got everything we needed and we headed up north.
Do firefighters still, I guess this is a question for either one of you, mm-hmm. Do firefighters still show up when, there's power outages or?
Most definitely. All risk, so it's we get responded to basically anything. When you call 911, you're going to get a response for fire and police as well, and then emergency EMTs or just the ambulance as well. So we respond to pretty much anything. Yeah.
And did firefighters show up when there was?
Yeah, we got the notification from them, and then we also had the opportunity to talk to some of the chiefs who were down the road, just keeping us updates and giving us information that we needed and weren't getting access from the internet.
What kind of information were they giving you?
Couple things like the wind direction and the patterns and kind of, we luckily where I live, it's we're on a ridge, so if the wind changes direction, we're the first house to go. But getting those little pieces of information from the chief was really helpful, and luckily we're all safe, which is nice.
Grant, when you're out fighting either wildfire or city fires, and you see a person like Wenjie that's, maybe a little bit unstable or frustrated, what are your protocols in calming the situation?
Kind of just reassuring them that we are going to do the best that we possibly can. Obviously, a number of factors can dictate the outcome, but just trying to reassure them that we are here to help them, and we are just going to do literally the best that we can. Like, we're going to put 110% into whatever we're doing.
Wenjie mentioned that, if the wind blows a different direction, his house was the first to go. So how do you, as a firefighter, how can you tell if, the wind is going to get close to our house? Or like when, there was videos on social media surfacing how there were some houses that were burnt down, but then a house next to a burnt down one was perfectly fine. How does that determine?
So with the whole change of wind direction, we call them checkpoints. So for a situation like his home, say a fire is burning on a ridge, and we know that if the wind does change, his home's gonna be the first to go. As soon as the wind changes, okay, we know that's a checkpoint. So now we need to send more resources to someone like a home like his, or a home that's in danger. Or if a fire is burning towards a certain ridge, like if it gets to this point, okay, now we need to start enacting like these certain types of protocols or whatever. In terms of the homes that were still standing, that's just a factor of people who may have, like his situation, he's 2-time evacuee, so someone who may have been in a situation like that before, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go through these types of measures if this ever happens again. I heard of people were setting off their sprinkler systems to just constantly go off. That was a big factor that helped out people. People that have concrete homes, because concrete doesn't really burn. Just a number of factors that kind of helped out people's situations over others, which may have been just a factor of they've gone through it before, or they've talked to someone who helped them out with figuring out different things to do to prevent their home from being lost.
Right. He mentioned a good point. This is your second time evacuating. So what was different the first time versus your second time evacuating? What different measures did you do or take?
I'm not sure about measures and different actions. We kind of have an idea of our necessities and kind of what we need and kind of the important stuff. And so really, once we were called into action, or we were given that notice, it's each person kind of has a task. Get these things. We have pets, so our first thing is help our dogs, make sure they have food, water, and some supplies. So that's one of my roles. So I was in charge of taking the dogs out and making sure everything they need is the first thing, and then getting clothes and some other things.
And how long were you evacuated for this recent time?
This recent time, to be completely honest, half our family stayed and half our family left. So my mom and dad, my mom and brother, they went up to Camarillo to visit my grandma, spend some time there, and my dad and I stayed back. So yeah.
During your time firefighting, I'm sure you've experienced, having people not want to evacuate their homes. Yeah. What do you do in that situation?
Yes, I've been in that situation many, many times, because people really don't really want to leave their home to kind of, I guess I would say, in some situations, they don't want to leave their home to maybe be lost. In that situation, you just have to like really, really put forward the urgency of the situation. In his situation, I mean, it was evacuation, but I mean, he's done it before, so maybe his dad maybe saw something like, hey, like, it's close, but it's not close enough to where they felt like they needed to evacuate. There are some situations where people were evacuating too late. In that situation, I mean, when that time comes, we kind of do like one last lap or whatever through a community to make sure everybody's evacuated. And if not, then we try to get them out as fast as possible.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a tough thing to evacuate a home, Wenjie. And during your time evacuating, you mentioned you have pets. Was it a struggle getting them out? Were you prepared? Did you know what to bring?
Yeah, because this isn't our first time doing it, we have kind of a little section part of our house that are for pet supplies. So we have food, water, bowls, and like little, I guess, containers that are all set, except for the water. I mean, you can get water anywhere. But so kind of once either the final lap or just when we're asked to go, those things are already there and it's easy just to grab, throw them in a bag, and then our dogs are smaller. We have 2 dachshunds, and luckily, we've kind of trained them so they're used to car rides, so they're not, stressing out, which is nice. But yeah.
And during the recent fires, Grant, this question is for you. What did you notice that was different during these fires? Why was it so impactful, and why was it not? Why was it able to spread so much?
The wind. The wind was the biggest factor. There's 3 things that kind of fuel a fire to spread quickly, and it's the topography. So if a fire starts on the bottom of a hill, it's going to go up the hill fast because it's running uphill. Things are going to run uphill fast because it's preheating the things that are above it. So it preheats it, then it burns it quicker. Topography, wind, and then it's just the fuel. So it was not very heavy fuel, which would be like timber, big trees. It was brush, which typically burns pretty quickly. And then the wind was, 80 mile an hour plus. So the fire will move pretty much as fast as the wind is blowing. So that was basically the main factor of the reason why it was spreading so fast.
When a fire is announced as contained, like 30% contained, 20% contained, what does that mean for a viewer that doesn't really understand the concept?
Right. So containment is based off of how much of the fire is pretty much mitigated, not necessarily put out. So when they say that it's 20% contained, that means that the start of the fire, which is typically going to be the least activity, that part is contained. There's water either put on it or hose lines around it to keep it in check. Or there's what they call hand line, which is where they take like the fuel or like brush or grass, whatever it's burning, they take that away so it has nothing to burn. That's part of the containment. So when it's 20% contained out of how big a fire is, that's just a little part of the fire that's pretty much put in check, like we don't have to worry about that anymore, and then we can move on.
Thank you both for your stories. We're going to take a quick break, and coming up next, we'll hear the story of how clever planning encouraged Save the Animals from the Teaching Zoo at Moore Park College from a disaster. Stay with us. Welcome back to CSUN On Point. Today we are taking a look at the California wildfires and how they have affected communities across Los Angeles area. We're joined by Riverside firefighter Grant Hall and 2-time Evacuee and CSUN student Wenjie Porter. When the Hughes fire threatened the teaching zoo at Moore Park College, staff jumped into action. Our On Point reporter Sam Klein visited the zoo and learned how the keepers handled this wild time.
The Hughes fire is one of many fires that have threatened SoCal communities over the last few weeks. The fire resulted in poor air quality for the animals in the teaching zoo at Moorpark College. Zoo staff sprung into action and began the long and complicated process of evacuating their animals.
So there's a lot of factors that we take into consideration when we decide to evacuate the zoo. One is the air quality. Our birds are really sensitive to smoke, so if the air quality is bad, we usually start to evacuate animals like our birds. If the fire looks like it's progressing fast in the area close by, we definitely start to make accommodations, look for places to take them. We keep in touch with local authorities to see how fast the fire is moving, and we get everything in place so that if we have to go, we can go very quickly. Most of our animals are crate trained, so they're all in the individual crates. We use vans for the smaller crates. We use trucks for the larger crates. With our tigers and our bigger animals, we have to use kind of big box trucks with lift gates to get them in, but we have all that stuff here and we're ready to go when we need it. I just think that our zoo is so phenomenal at training our animals for situations like this. Our students work really hard, our staff works really hard to make sure that if an emergency arises, we are fully prepared. So I feel like in these situations, although they're scary and terrifying, that we're very well prepared for these and can get through them.
Thanks to the well-prepared staff, all animals were evacuated safely. Samantha Klein, On Point, the teaching zoo at Moorpark College.
After watching this back, Wenjie, how important is it to be prepared your second time evacuating?
I think it's very important. I think staying calm is a very big thing too. I think once you start stressing out and getting nervous, you start to make mistakes, and that's when you start leaving things behind. You can leave food, if the dogs need a leash or any crates. If those are left behind, it's going to be, a running animal, running around.
Sam emphasized the importance of, keeping your animals safe. You mentioned before you had animals. Were they the first thing on, your evacuation list?
Yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of people, our pets are kind of like our family, and in our case, I grew up with them, and they're kind of they're one of us. So their safety is more important, than some of the material things that that we have.
And keeping your animals safe, I'm sure a lot of Angelinos that went through this fire can relate to you. Did you think you brought enough, food and water for them?
Yeah, I think we brought too much, which is, it's always good to have, too much, just in case something happens and there's a shortage of food or anything. Yeah.
Was there a part of you that was worried about your animals? The fire approaching, you evacuating. Were you worried that they weren't going to survive, or, wherever you would have went, they weren't accepting animals? Maybe?
Not really, actually. Luckily, we were able to go to my grandma's, and she doesn't have pets, so she's very relaxed about it, and she's very welcoming to those pets, which is nice, because I know some places definitely don't allow pets, and those are some big issues, for sure. But luckily we had a place to go, for sure.
And Grant, watching that back and what Wenjie said, have you experienced, rescuing animals or finding animals in the midst of a fire?
Right. I personally haven't ever experienced having to rescue any animals during fires, and I think that's a good thing. People seem to be more prepared, and I think that's something that his family did very well. Just having those already preset things that you're going to have doing, whether it's grabbing food for the animals, having that already preset and determined is something that's great.
And how can a person like Wenjie that has been evacuated more than once, how can they prepare when there's a fire approaching and they have animals?
Kind of similar to kind of what they already did. Have food for them already set aside. Not their main food, but food for evacuation situations already set aside. And then even though he says that they brought too much, like you said, you never know how long you're going to be evacuated for, so bring too much, prepare for a long period of time, even if it is something that's going to be a few days or something like that. It's always good to prepare for more than you expect.
And as a firefighter, you didn't work the recent fires, but for the viewers, and how would you say that the firefighters handled all these animals that were displaced during this really big fire?
I think that they did a great job. I know that they got in contact with a lot of local businesses that helped out. I was seeing a lot of postings on social media about if anybody had an open home that could take some of the animals. I think that they handled it in the media aspect very well to get the message out for any types of animals that they needed to evacuate.
And Wenjie, your experience with your animals, where was your family, affected by the way that you guys were evacuated? Can I know, how long did they give you to evacuate?
They gave us a long time, which is really nice. They gave us a couple days warning, and then, just saying that our area could be affected, and if it is, be ready. So we had maybe a day or two just to kind of have a plan and make sure everything is ready if we need to go, which is great.
And any surrounding neighborhoods that you saw were affected more, than your neighborhood, or any animals did you see displaced on your way out while evacuating?
No, not really, which is kind of good. Just because of our location, we're kind of towards the end of the areas. We're kind of, our back door is nature, so it's going to be all the brushes and everything there. And as we're going kind of, I guess, inward, more central, that was least affected, which is nice.
What is something that you left your home with that was very sentimental to you and that you could not leave behind besides, your pets?
Yeah, one of the big things is our family photos. My grandma is one of 8, so throughout the generations, of every gathering and big events, their photos were taken, and we have not put them on digital yet, and so they're all in many different books. So kind of packing those all together and loading them up in one car was one of our necessities for sure.
And Grant, hearing that back, have you ever experienced a moment where you find, you're working these fires and you find, sentimental items that have been burnt?
Yeah, so that's something that we're actually trained to do, whether it's for a wildfire and we're having to protect homes, but mainly for structure fires. It's called, we call it overhaul, and it's mainly just making sure that sentimental things are either taken out of the house, and it's usually after the fire is put out. So we'll go in, try to put out the fire, and then making sure all sentimental things are taken out of the house so they don't get any smoke damage or any damage when we're doing kind of salvage, which is kind of like, I guess, tearing parts of the roof to make sure that the fire hasn't spread anywhere in the attic or anything like that. Making sure that we're covering couches, any people that have gaming systems, covering stuff like that, like things that people would find valuable in their home, like trying to make sure that it doesn't get damaged or broken or anything like that. So that's something.
Wenjie, when you came back to your house, tell us about that experience. How did you feel coming back to a non-burnt down house?
It's definitely relieving. It's nice, I think it would be totally different if you come back home and it's kind of just rubble. It's definitely more devastating, and I'm very thankful that our house was standing and we had the opportunity to come home with no issues.
And Grant, can you tell us about how becoming a firefighter in situations like, Wenjie, not everyone comes back to a home. How do you handle that situation? Or have you ever been in that situation where you need to speak to an evacuee?
I haven't had to personally be in that situation. That's something that our public officers kind of handle, situations like that. But it's definitely disheartening. It's definitely sad for anybody to lose their home. I wouldn't want to wish that upon anybody. So it's definitely good to hear that people, him and his community, were able to come home to a home.
Wenjie, what do you have any advice for any evacuee that is going to get evacuated by a massive fire?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice would be to stay calm, especially in times of crisis. It's, your first instinct is fight or flight. And really, if you kind of take a second and calm down, you're able to, figure out what is needed to be done, and it'll be definitely faster that way for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience about staying calm? Is that your method?
Yeah, so for the Wolseley fire, that was the one that we were definitely more nervous about and more stressful just because of how big it was. We were, we really sat down before and we were like, if it comes to that point, make sure we do X, Y, Z and, be ready. And we had a meeting point, which was really important. But then, when it was that time, some of us were actually out. So we didn't have that connection, so we didn't know where to be. So my brother was at school or out near school, and once we lost contact, it was kind of, we had no clue where he was and if he was safe.
Right.
But luckily he's chilling.
Yeah.
And Grant, when you're preparing for wildfires or city fires, tell us a little bit more about that process. Like, what kind of training do you do? And do they prepare you for, all the emotional distress that comes with all this?
They do not train you for that. I myself have been very good with kind of just compartmentalizing things, leaving work at work. So when I come home, I'm home. But training-wise, we always have plans. We call it PACE. So we have a primary plan, an alternate plan, a contingency plan, and an emergency plan. You can never be too prepared. So we're constantly training every day, whether it's for city situations. We have areas within my city that we call them like hot areas. So like if something or a fire were to happen here, like we need to have a really specific plan because there's limited resources, there's limited water supply, like things like that. So we train on various different types of things daily to kind of just mitigate situations and kind of go over them through our head. And hopefully if they do go our way, then at least we have 3 or 4 different plans or different directions that we can go.
Mm-hmm. So it's very important to stay prepared in
Yes.
both aspects, the evacuee side and the firefighter side. One last thing, Wenjie, sorry. What do you think would you say to, the next person that is in this situation? Just a small sentence.
I would just say, believe and, understand that this is out of your control, but, if you're surrounded by others and loved ones, it's going to work out at the end of the day.
Yes, it is. Thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your stories. As we close tonight's show, we are left with a stark reminder of the immense danger of wildfires and the resilience of the people who face them. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time here on CSUN On Point.